Recent reports from mainland Chinese social media claim that Apple's global supply chain is rapidly restructuring. Apple plans to shift all iPhones destined for the US market to be manufactured in India by the end of 2026. Some sources suggest that as early as 2025, a large portion of iPhone models could begin assembly in India. To meet this goal, Apple must at least double its current iPhone production capacity in India. According to Reuters, filings at the London Stock Exchange reveal that Foxconn's Singapore-based subsidiary will acquire 12.77 billion shares of Yuzhan Technology India at 10 rupees per share, valued at approximately $1.5 billion US. This move comes as Apple seeks to avoid US tariffs by shifting more production away from China. Yuzhan Technology India is a Foxconn subsidiary located in Tamil Nadu. Besides manufacturing electronic components, the company also assembles Apple's iPhones. On May 20th, customs data showed that China's mobile phone exports to the US in April totaled $688 million US, the lowest monthly figure since June 2011. Bloomberg reported that in April, China's smartphone exports to the US fell by 72%, a much sharper decline than the overall 21% drop in Chinese exports to the US. This reflects how technology companies are relocating production of electronic goods out of China in response to high tariffs imposed during the Trump administration. Last year, the top 3 products imported by the US from China were smartphones, laptops, and lithium-ion batteries. On the other hand, liquefied petroleum gas, crude oil, soybeans, gas turbines, and semiconductor manufacturing equipment made up the largest U.S. exports to China. According to data from the General Administration of Customs of the People's Republic of China, China's exports of mobile phone components to India have increased about 4-fold in the past year. India is now Apple's largest iPhone production base outside of China. Regarding rumors that Apple is withdrawing production from China, many accounts on Chinese social media, often linked to coordinated or paid commenters, have loudly claimed no fear, Apple is the loser, or Apple cannot leave China. Some even mocked the lower production quality of Apple's products made in India. Last year, several accounts even suggested Apple's production lines would return to China from India. However, more rational voices have disputed these claims, offering analysis on why Apple is unlikely to return to China for manufacturing. Recently, there has been widespread talk that Apple's made in India have low production quality, and that Apple will move production back to China. This is simply a rumor and is not true. In reality, the iPhone yield rates in India are comparable to those in mainland China. The capacity moved to India will not return to China. Apple's share of production in China will only decrease, not increase. Have you seen Foxconn build new iPhone factories in China recently? No. Foxconn's recent 1 billion yuan investment in Zhengzhou is for research and development of electric vehicle components, which has nothing to do with iPhone production. Also, 1 billion yuan is not $1 billion US. It is far too little to build an iPhone factory. Why establish a new R&D center? Because compared to the factories, R&D centers are easier to relocate. If a war breaks out, it will be difficult to move quickly, but R&D centers can simply relocate if needed. Just issue US green cards to the researchers and keep most data on cloud servers. This causes minimal disruption. For example, Microsoft's AI division in China has issued green cards to its employees so they can move to the US at any time. Even companies like Nvidia and AMD from Taiwan set up R&D centers rather than factories there, because no one dares to build new factories in mainland China or Taiwan. So, do not believe these rumors. For Apple, risk diversification is essential. Concentrating production solely in mainland China is too risky. If a war broke out, Apple would essentially have no products to ship and could face bankruptcy. What we hope for now is a stabilization of US-China relations and less tension over Taiwan. Some comments under the video said, "I don't understand what gives us such confidence, as if the world would fall apart without us." Others thanked the speaker for telling the truth. Analysts say that while dealing with the impact of new tariffs, Apple executives have realized that shifting their supply chain to India is more necessary than expected. Reuters cited anonymous sources saying that in the final days before new tariffs took effect, a buying spree hit Apple stores across the US as customers rushed to purchase iPhones ahead of expected price increases. In response, Apple airlifted 600 tons, up to 1.5 million iPhones, from India to the US. This boosted the US market inventory and helped cushion the tariff impact. However, Apple's shift to India has met strong resistance from Chinese authorities. According to a report from Nikkei Asia in April, Apple was using the 90-day tariff grace period to accelerate relocating key supply chains to India and Vietnam and expand overseas factory capacity. Meanwhile, Beijing has tried to slow this process through strict customs inspections. Sources say Apple has instructed suppliers to ship as many components as possible from China to Southeast Asia and India to support demand in the US market. At the same time, Apple has asked suppliers to speed up moving production of printed circuit boards and other components to Thailand and other non-China locations. However, many components such as connectors, mechanical parts, and metal casings remain cost-effective to produce in China, so shifting mass production of these items elsewhere is unlikely in the short term. An executive from an Apple component supplier said, "We are being told to airlift as many parts as possible to Southeast Asia and India. It feels like the customer is clearing out all inventory and moving it out of China." Experts note that in the process of moving key supply chains from China, Apple has discovered significant risks. Foreign companies initially entered China cautiously, especially US firms, aware of the Chinese Communist Party's authoritarianism. But over time, many became complacent. This large-scale supply chain migration is a renewed wake-up call for industry giants. Apple's priority is shifting production of electronic components like printed circuit boards, while delaying the relocation of mechanical parts and metal casing production. This indicates that US companies, including Apple, recognize the high potential security risks of producing electronics in China. Multiple experts have warned that any electronic product made in China could contain backdoors, posing security risks that outweigh cost benefits. Setbacks and interference encountered while withdrawing from China will only strengthen the resolve of Apple and other foreign investors to leave. Apple CEO Tim Cook said on May 1st that in the coming months, most iPhones sold in the US will be made in India. Meanwhile, Vietnam will become the main manufacturing hub for iPads, Macs, Apple Watches, and AirPods destined for the US. Cook stated, "Our supply chain is very complex. There are always risks. We realized before that putting everything in one place is too risky. China appears especially sensitive to news about Apple's supply chain shifts." A Hong Kong analyst recently reported that iPhone production lines in China dedicated to the US market remain shut down, confirming that from the second quarter onward, India will fully take over export plans. Mainland Chinese media mistakenly reported this as a complete shutdown of all iPhone production lines in China. Supply chain sources quickly refuted the claim. The analyst clarified that he did not say all non-US production lines were shut down or refer to component manufacturing. Chinese authorities are using multiple tactics in response to Apple's supply chain shift. First, they are pressuring Apple by spreading rumors to test the company's reactions. They imply that if Apple withdraws, obstacles will be created, imposing heavy costs on the company. Second, they attempt to gauge and shape public opinion by stirring up opposition. Yet, due to intense internal power struggles at the CCP's top levels and chaotic propaganda messaging, the public reaction on social media is mostly hostile or indifferent toward Apple's exit. Many accounts even expressed support for Apple leaving, with some paid commentators harshly telling Apple and other foreign brands to get out of China. Voices with clearer awareness are mostly deleted online and remain rare. Third, the authorities use moral coercion. If Apple does not explicitly deny rumors, CCP propaganda will treat the rumors as fact to mislead the public into believing Apple will stay. Then, if Apple officially leaves, the blame is shifted onto Apple for breaking promises, since it had previously given tacit approval to remain. Analysts say this contradictory stance reflects the CCP leadership's distorted psychology. On one hand, they do not want Apple to leave. On the other hand, they refuse to show weakness or change themselves. This results in confused and irrational public posturing. Among the Chinese public, many hold a clear understanding of Apple and other foreign companies' departure, but they accept that as long as the CCP remains in power, such exits are inevitable. What is America's China Plus One strategy? It's simple. Find an alternative manufacturing base outside China. We once thought saying "don't let Apple leave" was alarmist. Now it's happening. Some even accuse me of speaking for the US. But but Apple is truly leaving. Foxconn has moved to India. Apple's production share in India rose from 5% to 30%. Foxconn's 300,000 workers in Henan relied on Foxconn. Now Foxconn is leaving, dealing a heavy blow to Henan's economy. Zhengzhou's GDP is sharply declining. Many don't realize how many jobs Apple's supply chain created. When customers come to your small restaurant to eat spicy hot pot, it's because Apple's supply chain created large employment and people have money to spend. Now Apple and Foxconn are gone, and massive unemployment and economic downturn follow. Henan's economy is wilting instantly. Apple, as a foreign high-tech enterprise, not only drives industrial upgrading, it supports upstream and downstream industries and local economies. Do you think nothing will happen if Apple leaves? Can Huawei be in the lead?
Apple left, Tesla left, Coca-Cola left, Microsoft left. Many commented under my previous video saying foreign brands get out of China. But have you thought, if all these foreign brands leave, our domestic brands will at least double their prices? Are you happy with that?
On Chinese social media platforms like Douyin, some accounts hint neither China nor the US can do without the other economically. If Apple and other supply chains move out, China could use its rare earth supplies to exert leverage over Apple. I saw a foreign news report today. Since the US-China trade talks in Geneva called a truce on tariffs, the US's main concern now is our rare earth materials. Statistics show that in 2023, Eastern China produced 62% of the global rare earth supply. After refining, it accounts for 92% of global production, nearly a monopoly. Rare earths are widely used in iPhones, electric vehicles, F-35 fighter jets, and more. After the truce, the US is most concerned about when normal rare earth exports will resume. Currently, 28 companies have been removed from export control lists. This relationship between the two countries is like holding each other's lifelines. CNN quoted experts and industry insiders saying there is no sign Beijing plans to ease rare earth export controls. Instead, enforcement is tightening to maintain bargaining chips in future negotiations. U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer said on May 12th that they expect China to lift rare earth export restrictions, but no signs of easing have appeared. The one batch, one permit system requires individual export licenses for each shipment, causing delays and concerns, especially for the U.S. auto and defense industries. CNN also reported that under the Geneva Trade Agreement, China promised to remove non-tariff countermeasures against the U.S. since April 2nd. But whether restrictions on 7 rare earth minerals and related products implemented on April 4th are included remains unclear. These heavy rare earth magnets are widely used in iPhones, electric vehicles, F-35 jets, and missile systems, with China dominating global supply. John Hockway, chairman of Toronto-based Stormcrow Capital, said Greer's statements sound more like hopeful wishes than concrete results. Thomas Krumer, CEO of a Singapore supply chain company, pointed out China's rare earth controls specifically target the U.S. defense industry and are unlikely to be relaxed. Analysts note that since Trump's return to the White House, he has launched major moves, including mediating the Russia-Ukraine war and reviving plans to buy Greenland. These actions signal a core strategic goal: securing and rebuilding the rare earth supply chain. Trump emphasized the importance of rare earths for national security and industrial development during his previous term, and promoted supply diversification. Now back in office, these policies are accelerating. Against this backdrop, Apple is steadily moving its supply chains out of China, especially shifting iPhone production for the US market to India and other countries. The Chinese government has responded by limiting rare earth exports as a countermeasure. As a key user of rare earth materials, Apple is under substantial pressure, which confirms that warnings on rare earth risks were justified. The obstacles Apple faces and the pace of its exit from China closely relate to progress in rebuilding the US rare earth supply system. Rare earths are essential for Apple, and the CCP fully understands this. Whether Apple's supply chain can shift smoothly depends heavily on the US establishing a stable and reliable rare earth resource network, a core focus of Trump's policies. Trump's version 2.0 trade war has has turned over all the cards between the US and China. After this upheaval, Apple's issue is no longer whether it wants to leave China, but how to do so effectively. Looking ahead, as the Trump administration strengthens domestic rare earth production and expands cooperation with allies, American companies like Apple will gain confidence to complete the shift of manufacturing bases. A full exit of iPhone production for the US market from China is not only possible, it is likely to become a symbolic milestone of US-China technology decoupling.